So this talk is aimed for folks who are getting their first Python job, but some of the advice I think helps for searching for any job. And I'm also a very casual lecturer, so if you guys have questions at any time, feel free to interrupt me. So I think the first thing about getting your first job is know that your online portfolio is your resume. And I think in today's world, recruiters and hiring managers can actually look at your code instead of trying to infer your programming skills from reading bullet points on a resume. So when you build your online portfolio, build it with the same level or attention to detail as you would writing out your resume. So think of mistakes where you don't follow the style guide, similar to having a typo on a resume. And think of documentation is demonstrating how thorough and well organized you are as an employee. The same way a well laid out resume demonstrates your ability to deliver a polished product. So I think a lot of people underestimate the value of online portfolios and don't realize how carefully recruiters look at them. The other things you can do is to build your personal presence, which is really important as your first job because you don't have work experience you can talk to. So your online portfolio is going to be the equivalent of your work experience. And being able to show domain expertise through either a personal website and maybe blog articles on different topics, different projects you've worked on, or being able to answer questions on Stack Overflow are great ways to demonstrate that domain expertise, even though you're not maybe using Python in your day-to-day work. Second point I want to make is how important networking is. And I think when a lot of people talk about networking, it's more of a social process. But when I talk about networking, I want you to think of it as a job. So when you network for the purposes of getting your first job in Python, you should be setting a target for how many people you're going to reach out to every week. And you should be tracking that on a spreadsheet and be very methodical about it. Keep track of when you reach out to people, have a cadence in which you follow up people if you don't get an initial response, and keep notes on each individual. And it's going to be a numbers game. You're going to reach out to so many people through your networks, and it could be through your alumni networks, your friends and family, whatever organizations you be members of. And once you reach out to those folks, you're probably only going to yield a percentage, maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 out of people that you reach out will actually follow through with a meeting. But when you meet with those people, come very prepared. Any question that can be answered through a Google search or search through news articles shouldn't be a question you should be asking. You want to be respectful of that person's time. But the other piece is when you come prepared, if you've read every article on that business and that company, and you're really familiar with that industry, when you meet with that person, you're going to give a very, very positive impression, and that's going to go a long way. The other thing I recommend is having some prepared questions. I think there's some standard questions I would recommend everyone ask, like, what do you like the most? What do you like least about your job? Where do you see yourself in a couple of years? What were the keys to your success in getting this job? Start with those questions. As you network and you talk to different people who work with Python, you'll start learning about the different types of jobs, and they'll help you hone in on what types of companies or what types of Python jobs are going to be most attractive to you. It'll also help understand what skills or tools you'll need for those different jobs, because there's so many different skills you can develop in Python. It's often hard to navigate how you should prioritize. But as you talk to different people and you start building a stronger opinion about what type of Python jobs you're interested in, that will help guide you on what you should focus your studies on. If they give you advice, you've got to always follow up on that advice and to maintain that relationship, and always offer any help you can. Now, it's not often that you can have a lot of help to offer right now, but sometimes you might have a friend or colleague who might eventually go through the process of trying to get their first job in Python, and you can be a valuable reference for them. And if you do a good job of impressing the contact that you're networking with, you can ask for referrals and just simply ask, are there any people that you'd recommend that I talk to? And if you've done a really good job on the previous bullet points, you're going to have a lot of credibility with that contact, and hopefully they'll share one or two people within their network. And as you start getting more and more contacts from meetings, your network will grow. And what's great about having this network, you're going to learn from each meeting, but also if opportunities come up in each of these organizations in a month, 3 months, even a year, and you left a good impression, they might remember you and reach out to let you know that a new opportunity has opened. Now, I think preparing for interviews is critical. Once you get your foot in the door, you want to make most of that opportunity. And one thing I want to point out is coding interviews are very different from just writing code. I mean, I think there are a lot of online interviews, but you have the pressure of possibly having someone work side by side with you, getting comfortable with that. The other part is a lot of coding interviews are sometimes done on a whiteboard in person. And writing code on a whiteboard is very, very different than typing code out. So it's good to practice, and that's the only way you're going to get good. The other point I want to make out is every interview, even if you don't get a job, should help you grow. As you learn the different questions that are being asked, it'll help you understand what parts of the portfolio you need to continue to build and grow, and what topics you need to study so you'll be successful in each future interview. So when I think of a successful interview, sometimes the learning that you get from that interview is going to be helpful in making you successful in the next interview that you have. And then career changes require a lot of grit. If it was easy to change careers, people would be doing it all the time. And especially moving into a technical field like Python can be very, very challenging. And I think going in with a mindset that you need grit to be successful is going to help you quite a bit. That first job is going to be the toughest job toughest job to get. Once you get that job, you're going to start accumulating experience, and that experience is going to make it so much easier to get that second or third job. Pretty soon after you get a certain number of months under your belt, companies will start reaching out to you as opposed to you reaching out to companies. And as you go through this process, keep in mind that you have to be lucky. A lot of it has to be timing, getting the right introduction to a company, matching up with skills, and you could be a fantastic individual, but just have bad luck and not have success in interviewing based on what opportunities pop up and your timing when you enter the market. But one thing to keep in mind, that luck always favors the prepared. So the more prepared you are, the better chance you'll be lucky. Now, as you start evaluating different opportunities, you should value the experiences you're going to get and the growth you can get more so than the compensation. When you think about your long-term compensation, the more important piece of that first job is how quickly you learn, because it's not about how much money you make at that particular point in time, it's how quickly you move up that compensation curve. So if you can get to a intermediate Python programmer in a year versus 3 years, your compensation is going to be significantly higher than the $10,000 or maybe $20,000. That's the difference between that first Python job that you get. So make sure you're valuing the experience you're gaining, because that's going to lead to higher compensation more so than the actual compensation you'll get in that first job. Now, this next point, I think you can tell a person as many times as you want, but it's hard to internalize when you're going through the process, which is just getting mentally prepared for rejection. When you switch careers and you move into a new field, you're not going to have the same success you're accustomed to in your previous career. And it can be very, very difficult for folks who have traditionally been successful to start getting rejected at an incredibly high rate that they're not used to. But one way to think about this is sort of like having a salesman's mentality or salesperson's mentality. And the way I think about this is there are a lot of sales folks I've met over time, and they have to cold call a lot of customers. And out of every 100 customers they reach out to, 10 might actually have a conversation with them. And of those 10, 5 might actually be opened up to an opportunity, and then they might convert 1 as a sale. So as you go through all of these leads as a salesperson, you recognize that as you go through these bad leads, you're getting through the 99 bad leads that will yield the 1 sale that you're looking for faster. So as you get rejected from jobs, just think of it as, it's a numbers game. You're going to have to go through so many different applications before you get that job offer. And the more, the faster you get through these interviews and the more rejections you accumulate, you're kind of working through these sales leads until you find that matching opportunity. And then the last part, because once you get mentally worn down from this rejection process, it's really easy to start compromising on your personal career goals and maybe take a job that you're not going to be able to use your Python skills as much. But don't compromise on the job. Just keep grinding. It's a numbers game. That this is going to be the toughest part of the process, getting that first job, and everything else is going to be easier after that. So keep this in mind. It takes a lot of grit to go through this process. Again, if it was easy, then you'd have a lot more people programming in Python and the compensation wouldn't be as good. So it's actually a nice barrier to entry to once you get past that, get over that hump. But don't compromise. I think that's the biggest mistake that I see when people start getting rejected from a lot of opportunities. They kind of give up, and then 3 years down the road, they realize that they never really were able to get a job where they're programming in Python as a primary component of their job. And so a little bit of me, I do teach at General Assembly. I don't want this to be a sales pitch, but there are a couple free events for people who are newer to Python. And then we have a discount code, get 75% off on a couple upcoming classes. So, there are lots of ways to learn Python. These are a few, but if you're interested, here are some good ways to get involved free. And for the classes that we do offer, actually, I've never seen a 75% off coupon before. So this is pretty amazing, I have to say.
Because we love San Diego and this meetup.
And that's it. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer questions, but otherwise I'll turn it over. So maybe I can send the presentation to you, or I'll post the links to the different stuff on the chat maybe.
Yeah, post the links in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That would be good.
Anybody have any questions though before we move on to the next?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
Craig's advice might be good here. You mentioned having good interview questions for the interviewer, and this probably comes up in IT a lot. What's a way to say, can employees here affect change, and how has that been dealt with in the past? I know it's hard to politely say, what happens when people step on toes or they want to make a big change? What's a good way to ask that?
So I think a couple things. One, I probably wouldn't ask a question like that until you get the job offer first. It's just not worth taking a risk. And then once you have the offer, then that's probably a more appropriate time to ask a question. I'd probably, if you want to get a more honest answer, I'd probably ask someone who's at the same sort of level that you'll be joining at to get their opinion, as opposed to the hiring manager or the HR person, because they're going to always give you a happier and glossier picture than what it really is. And I think that's the best way you'll get the most accurate impression of what the company culture is like.
I guess you could word it like, what kind of culture of change what's the culture like for affecting change?
If it's really part of their culture, if you just ask them general questions about the culture, they'll start bringing it up and bringing up examples because they'll be proud of it. If they're not bringing it up, then you probably know it's not as high of a priority. It may still be there. And then if you talk to someone in the organization, that's more of a peer as opposed to a manager or HR person, you'll get that probably more honest answer. I think in the tech industry, I find most people, when you talk to them, are pretty honest about the jobs, more so than some other industries. But yeah, I think. But yeah, asking the question probably after you get the job is probably the biggest piece of advice. So I tell a lot of folks, ask questions that show engagement when you're interviewing, like learning about the culture, but ask the tougher questions after you've gotten the offer, and you'll have a little more leverage.